Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I provide online divorce mediation and valuation services in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, we will discuss insight into dental market transactions with Maria Melone. Maria is a leading M&A advisor to the dental industry and an investment banker in Chicago, Illinois, with a mission to help both individual dentists and dental groups navigate the complex landscape of dental practice transactions. Maria is the managing director at Caber Hill Advisors, also located in Chicago, Illinois. A lot of times when they come for a valuation, they're really looking at like, how much could I sell this for? Right. And they're like, I want the biggest number. So what's the biggest number I can get? But that's not actually how we look at this, right? Because there's a way to price a dental practice to sell.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's a way to like hope that you get millions of dollars for whatever you want. You know, like a lot of times people are saying, I just want somebody to pay me $2 million. And it's like, okay, what's the basis for that? So is there really a basis of how you price the practice to sell, and what kind of goes into that process on your end?
Yeah. It's really a tough question to boil down into a nice, concise answer. As with any business, there's so many facets of what truly makes that business tick. And when we think about, dental practices in particular, by far the largest majority of the value of a practice or even, a group of practices is in the intangible asset, the goodwill of those businesses. And so, when we look at the value, the things that we talk about are growth. So, does the practice have a history or even multiple locations? Is there a history of historical growth? And is there any sort of path or identified path for continued growth? And that can either be, adding an associate, adding a hygienist, maybe going to a continuing education class and learning how to do implants. And so now you're increasing the types of procedures that you can perform. It can be doing an acquisition of an existing practice or building a practice from scratch, which we refer to as de novo. So, I would say growth is typically one of the biggest things that we look at, certainly for a solo practitioner. And this happens, or at least I've come across it many, many times, where a doctor gets later on into their career, they start to either scale back their time. So maybe they go from 4 days to 3 days. Maybe they are also scaling back the types of procedures that they're doing. So, and then we see a revenue drop. And, a lot of times those doctors will come to me and say, well, but, 2 years ago I was doing 2 million. And I was like, that's great. But, this past year, you've only done, 1.4 million. And, somebody can't pay you based on 2 million because we don't know if those patients that made up that $2 million revenue stream are still part of your practice. And chances are they're not. And sort of related to that, one of the things that I, typically focus on is new patients per month. And to me, that's a very good indicator of if the practice is truly a dying practice or if it's a healthy practice that's continuing to bring new patients in. And in fact, I like to look at that more so than what a lot of people look at and focus on, which is active patients. And I find that most people that aren't, well educated in the dental industry get hung up on this active patient count when in fact, nobody has a definition. There's no standard definition of what an active patient is. So is an active patient someone that's come in the last 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? Does that include an emergency visit that, maybe they've only had one visit and we don't know if they're ever going to come back for continued care. So, and then also, all of the softwares tend to measure that differently. So, in my opinion, it's really, not a very good thing to focus on. And then other things that we look at, obviously, are the physical plant. Is the practice or group of practices modern and up to date? Are they, today digital radiography is really, I would say, considered a standard of care. And so, if your practice doesn't have digital radiography, that's definitely seen as a negative and something that, a new owner is going to have to make an investment in pretty quickly, especially because, all of the younger practitioners nowadays are trained in that. And so, along those lines, it's so interesting to me how many doctors, especially solo practitioners, they opened their practices 35 years ago. I'm sure they were beautiful and state of the art at that time, but they've really neglected, to make any investment into the practice. And, now, we're faced with a tough situation where, again, somebody's going to have to come in and certainly do at least some cosmetic stuff, but more likely some significant investment into, the chairs and the equipment and even computers and desks and things like that. And then probably another big area would be the staff. So having a trained staff, obviously, is very important, especially when you think about a doctor to doctor transition. Most doctors that are coming into practice ownership don't have experience with that. And, most younger doctors, even though, maybe they've worked a couple of years in a practice, they're still working on their clinical skills. And so having a trained staff there that can support them and help them with, more of the non-clinical aspects of the practice, but also help them, work on developing themselves clinically, is really important, especially for those younger practitioners and new owners of businesses.